I'm Cristin Severance, the documentary investigator at WRAL. We have a brand new documentary all about how UNC hired Bill Belichick. I interviewed former quarterback and longtime NFL analyst Boomer Esiason about all things Belichick. Here is that interview. If you are watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. Boomer Esiason, thank you so much for joining us. You are such a well-respected and such a big name in football. Tell me, what does Bill Belichick mean to the sport?
Wow, I'll tell you what, in my eyes, the greatest football coach who's ever walked the NFL sideline. I can't say that about college just yet, but I will say in the NFL, I saw him do things that very few coaches were able to accomplish, both in building a team, running a team, managing a game, which is really an underappreciated part of what he was able to do when he was the head coach of the Patriots. So he's a first ballot Hall of Famer as far as I'm concerned. And I think most people that are a part of the NFL recognize the greatness that still resides there.
Talk about when, the rumors first started that he may be coming to Carolina. What went through your mind?
I was shocked. I really was. And this was after I thought he was going to get the Atlanta Falcon job. And he was the #1 guy. And all of a sudden, Arthur Blank out of the blue decided to go with Raheem Morris, which is fine. Everybody can make their own decisions. But I think maybe he was just intimidated by Bill and what he had accomplished up in New England. And maybe Robert Kraft warned him about certain things that he would have to deal with that he didn't want to deal with. But I'll tell you one thing, for the most part, if you hire Bill Belichick, you're getting the whole package. I mean, you are getting somebody who's going to run your football program. And I think that's probably what North Carolina was looking for, kind of like what Colorado was looking for when they hired Deion Sanders. They wanted to promote football. They wanted to take it to the next level. And as we're finding out, it's just not that easy. Exactly.
So did you watch the first game against TCU?
Of course, like everybody else, I wanted to see what it was going to look like. And when it first started, it was amazing. I was like, wow, they went right down the field and scored a touchdown. This is going to be great. But the thing about TCU is they had a coach there, I think that's been there for 10 or 12 years. He's been in college football his whole life. The game of college football is significantly different. Plus, he had his roster together for 3, 4, 5 years. Bill and his staff had to bring in 70 new players. And now you're throwing them out there with these expectations that you're going to be a part of a national championship is really unrealistic. And I think a lot of us were hoping for better, probably more disappointed now than ever before because of what has happened here. But at the end of the day, if the patience can reside, the results will show itself eventually, unless he decides to go to the NFL.
So after that first drive, you thought, wow, he's going to do this.
I did. I really did. And but again, football it's a hard game. It's a game of failure. And the one thing, it's also a game of trust. And as players that are out there for the first time together, it takes a while for that trust to develop. It takes a while for the culture to develop around the players and the organization. So every new coach and every new position always talks about culture and trying to find that special culture that's going to lead to a winning team. And that just doesn't happen overnight. Every now and again, you get a guy in the NFL that actually has immediate success. I think it's harder now in the NCAA than it is at the NFL level, just simply because of all the movement and the money and all the outside influences that those programs have to deal with.
Talk about, Boomer, we did many reports. We've done a series of reports after that Clemson game where, players talked about division in the locker room. Parents complained that they did not know what was going on and their sons did not know what was going on. Complaints about how, Belichick and his staff were running the team. What did you think of that?
This is what losing does. Losing creates problems. And the one thing that Bill could always control at the NFL level is he could threaten a guy with his job, which his livelihood is. That was the last stop. And so you either followed the rules or you were out. At the college level now, these are things that all coaches are dealing with. They're dealing with social media. They're dealing with individual brands. And I can't even imagine that a guy like Coach Belichick, who for years and years and years was always preaching we. Now you got to deal with 18-year-olds and 20-year-olds, and you're dealing with parents. He never dealt with parents when he was a coach in the NFL. I mean, these were men that he was coaching. So it's a completely different set of circumstances. And even Dabo Sweeney, by the way, is under immense pressure at Clemson, and he won them a national championship. College football is insane right now. And the best thing that I would advise anybody is to try to be as consistent and try to be as patient as you possibly can. A winner will develop, but it's not going to happen overnight.
You bring up the 18-year-olds and the parents. Coach Belichick and Michael Lombardi were very confident. They said, we're going to come in here. This is going to be the 33rd NFL team. Do you think maybe they should have thought about how old these kids were and their parents would be involved?
I'm sure they knew that. Of course they knew that. And the fact is, you don't really understand how to deal with it until you're living through it. And living through it and expecting it are two different things. My college roommate, Frank Reich, took on the interim job at Stanford, and he's coaching Stanford for Andrew Luck for 1 year. And I asked him, how difficult is it to coach these kids? He goes, Boomer, it's a different world. He says, I love my kids because I can be so influential in their lives, and hopefully I'm going to make them better people and better human beings and better men. But this is just a different world, and it really is. And you just wonder if a 72-year-old budding Hall of Fame head coach can actually make these guys understand what he's trying to accomplish. Now, this also comes along with all the other stuff in his life, which is very difficult to deal with, especially when you're on page 6 of the New York Post, or you're on the back of TMZ, or you're somewhere because of your personal life, which creates a whole nother level of distraction, which I'm sure is not fun for the people living it.
Absolutely. Do you think, as someone who's you played against Belichick, you've known him for years, do you think he can do this? Do you think he can relate to these kids and coach them up and relate to them and recruit and do all the things he has to do?
I think he can. The question is there an NFL team desperate enough to go out and take him from North Carolina? Now, that could happen. Now, it also may not happen because of his current personal situation. We talk about this here in New York all the time because he's a legendary New York Giants football coach. And New York Giant fans love him because of what he and the great Lawrence Taylor from North Carolina, of course, actually accomplished when they were here in the 80s. So if there's a desperate NFL team out there that is trying to lure back fans and sponsors and suite sales, parking sales, and you name it, maybe he decides to get back into the NFL, but I hope that's not the case. I'd like to see it happen there for him at North Carolina. You just never know about the winds of change and which way they're going to be blowing come, January or February.
After all of the stories, they did get a win, first ACC win. What is your prediction for the rest of the season and maybe next year?
I'm more worried about my University of Maryland personally, but I will tell you that I do have an eye on North Carolina, and I do have an eye on Stanford because of my buddy Frank there. And I know these two teams are going to play here shortly, I believe. My expectations are that they're going to get better as the season goes along. The thing is that it's not a 16-game season in college, so it's a much shorter opportunity for success. And then the question comes, is the success that we had this year, is it something that we can build on and look forward to next year? That's probably the question that a lot of the regents and all the people that are part of the hiring are asking themselves, or do they have to rip it all down and start over some other way? And that's why I always preach patience. And hopefully Bill is saying that to whoever, the athletic director, the president of North Carolina, and saying, look, this will happen and I'm not leaving to go to the NFL. But again, we're always talking about assurances in sports, and nothing's ever assured or guaranteed when it comes to human interaction and how people interact with each other. So I can only hope that he's enjoying his time at North Carolina. I know losing's not a lot of fun, and I'm sure that the off-the-field stuff is not a lot of fun to deal with, but at the end of the day, this is what he chose, and hopefully he sees it through.
You mentioned off the field, distractions. Jordan Hudson, not just his partner, but works with him, CC'd on the emails, so many stories about her and them. Are you surprised that Bill Belichick is in this position to be on page 6, to be covered by TMZ?
I watch his ex-players on all their podcasts, And they're all blown away by this particular distraction because they were told when they were players for him that he wouldn't stand for this stuff. So yeah, I mean, like I could only go by what his former players were saying. And as much as I find Bill to be a very gregarious, funny guy outside of football, when you're away from football and you're with him and you're hanging out and having a beer, he's a great storyteller. He's got a great personality. But in the middle of a football season, covering him as an analyst, he's about as grumpy and is like, angry as any football coach I've ever been around. But that's just what the aura around him is. So, maybe in his private life, that's where he finds happiness. At least that's the way it looks to me from this point.
Great. Is there anything else you have to add about the situation?
No, other than I just wish him nothing but the best of luck, and hopefully he becomes a success there and they can get out of him what they thought they were going to get when they hired him and Mike Lombardi.
The Board of Trustees did this, right? I mean, this was Bubba Cunningham, the athletic director, did not go after a 72-year-old man. He was going to hire a young up-and-coming. Do you think the Board of Trustees will be patient enough?
Well, that's where the human interaction comes. So you have already different people doing different jobs for people who are hired to do a certain job. And are the Board of Trustees undercutting the athletic director? So that's the internal personal issues that everybody's got to get through. And if they all are on the same page, then they all hope for the very best for North Carolina football and the athletic department. But if they're not, and there is this personal interaction and friction that is happening, then something has got to give. Somebody's got to go. And Bill would tell you that himself. If he were coaching a football team and he had a problem with a player, or a player had a problem with a coach, one of the two are going. And he would look down and he would sit at that table and he would say, okay, what's the issue here? Can we fix it? Can we not fix it? And if we can't fix it, then somebody's got to move on. And I would imagine, given all the noise around the program, that's probably what everybody is kind of sifting through right now. And I don't know if there are two sides. I mean, I'm sure that there are a lot of people that don't like what's going on in his personal life, but that's his personal life. You got to let him play. You got to let him coach football. And I would just say patience is the key, unless he decides to go back into the NFL if there's a team willing to take a chance on him.
Great. Boomer, thank you so much. That was great.
Yes,
really appreciate it. It's been really interesting to cover, and this was
I'm sure
amazing.
It is. I'm sure
Yes,
it is.
we talk about it all day, and there's always, we're learning so much. But thank you again. Have a great rest of the day, and really appreciate you.